I did some off-screen mining,
Still, in
and
1967, the
I
FCC started
the
enforcing
team I
what's called
have
the
right.
fairness doctrine on tobacco ads. For every 3 cigarette ads on television stations, 1 anti-smoking commercial would have to be aired and paid for by the tobacco industry. The compromise worked decently well, and the anti-tobacco ads led to a sudden and dramatic drop in smoking rates in the United States, somewhere between 5 to 10%. Eventually, smoking ads on TV were banned entirely, but also not really, since cigarette companies could still pay for advertisements on billboards and signs in sporting events that were being televised, like NASCAR and especially baseball. For decades, you could find a tobacco company's logo and name out there in the bleachers, especially visible during home runs, the moment people are paying the most attention to. Even when sporting agencies started cracking down on logos, sponsors got really clever in hiding their ads anyway. But I'm getting off track. This video is supposed to be about kids' TV stuff, like how in 2015, Juul Labs, the electronic cigarettes maker, bought advertisements to display on various children's TV websites like CartoonNetwork.com and Nickelodeon.com. In their defense, Juul claimed that they weren't intentionally marketing to underage users, and hey, I'm sure there's some adults on CartoonNetwork.com, but how about the other sites they advertised on, like CoolMathGames.com, BasicMathematics.com, and oh, this one's great, SocialStudiesForKids.com. Holy Juul! In 2020, the Massachusetts Attorney General's office filed a lawsuit over these ads, which is currently ongoing, but not looking great for Juul. And in 2015, there was also mounting pressure on Puffsport for targeting teens, with flavors like pina colada, watermelon, and a flavor literally called OMG. Okay, just for a second, we're gonna pretend that OMG is a flavor, because obviously it's not a real flavor. What the hell would that be? That's still not a flavor that you market to adults.
I get it.
You know what? Maybe smoking ads for children and that creepy-eyed, now in turn puppet tiny people eater were a little too heavy for our first couple of topics. Let's do something fun next. Just kidding, this one's gonna suck too. Here's a list of beloved animal stars that aren't alive anymore. Keiko, the orca from Free Willy, the dog from Air Bud, Mr. Ed the horse, Spuds McKenzie, the dog from Little Rascals. Okay, that was like 100 years ago. Of course he's dead. Most dogs who have played Lassie. Sad, but again, not unexpected. All 48 of the pigs who played Babe the Pig. All of them? All of them. How long do pigs live? And finally, that little sneezing baby panda Chi-Chi, who, yes, had their own movie, and yes, is also dead.
But Numble evolves at level 33? How the fuck did Flannery get at level 26?
None of those animals' deaths were the fault of Hollywood or TV. They lived full, healthy, happy lives before dying. Well, not the Little Rascals dog. Yeah, he got straight up poisoned.
I want an
like
exploding
said,
pool.
which is messed up. Oh, or Keiko, she got dumped into the ocean and then never really assimilated with other orca and then died alone of pneumonia. But the other animals, full lives, full happy lives. Still, it's at least fair that we delve into humanity's rocky history when it comes to animals being used for entertainment. Here's a neat ancient Roman history fact. You already knew that lions were commonly used in Colosseum arena games, but did you know that when the Romans first dropped lions into the pit lions, they just kind of wouldn't. It's true, in the early games, these terrified friggin' lions got tossed into an enclosed space with 100,000 people screaming at them and did what anybody would do, what I would do. They just went and hid in the corners. The audience was mighty disappointed by that, although you have to imagine that the people in the arena were probably pretty thrilled. To make sure that lions would be more aggressive, the Roman animal trainers started keeping them inside the halls of the Colosseum and conditioning them to attack people, all for our entertainment. Things have improved for animal entertainment in the modern era, but there are still unpleasant stories from behind the scenes. Let's talk about Flipper. Inspired by the 1950s TV show Lassie, which was about a dog that went around and helped people out of dangerous situations, Flipper was about a dolphin that went around and helped people out of dangerous situations. You may be thinking, hey, how many situations can a dolphin actually help people in? And the answer is, not that many. So the writers had to keep coming up with increasingly elaborate and implausible scenarios that could somehow only be resolved by a wicked smart dolphin. There were boat-based hostage situations, oil rig counterfeit operation bust. There's one where Flipper is put on a plane. They put a dolphin on a plane to take him to a laboratory that wants to teach him how to speak English. There's a communist spy plot. There were multiple episodes where Flipper eats something valuable, like a bracelet or whatever, and everyone's like, well, Flipper, thanks for always saving our dumbass kids, but this rich woman really wants that diamond necklace you ate. We're just gonna have to cut you open to get it. Yep. This happened like 3 times in a show with 60 episodes. Flipper was a weird show. The role of Flipper was mostly played by a dolphin named Kathy, who had been caught in the wild and trained for performances. And by all accounts, Kathy seemed to enjoy working on the series, and there's no evidence of mistreatment by her trainers or the staff during production. But after the show ended, things took a downward turn for Kathy's well-being. She was sent to live in a small chamber in the Miami Seaquarium, which, after years of frequent outings for show filmings and constant human interaction, she had a lot of trouble adjusting to. According to the staff there, Kathy wouldn't eat, wouldn't swim, and eventually started intentionally hurting herself against the walls of the chamber, a thing dolphins apparently do. The staff called in Rich O'Barry, Kathy's former trainer from the show, who said that when he found Kathy, she swam into his arms, held her breath, and passed out in the water, dying soon after. O'Barry believes her death was intentional, self-determination.
If I can get up on a soapbox for a second here, something TV studios and Hollywood in general are usually really good at is protecting animal performers during show productions. At least they are now. But there's no additional regulations on how animal stars are cared for off-set after a show ends.
In the late 1960s, television producer Joanne Gans Cooney and early educational specialist Lloyd Morissette were developing plans for a new kind of children's television program, focusing on educating children instead of just entertaining them. But they needed a way to keep kids' attention for the entire length of the show's runtime, and the answer was puppets. Enter Jim Henson. Henson had made a name for himself in television, puppeteering with both his short-lived but popular 1950s series Sam and Friends, as well as a few well-received talk show performances.
Oops.
Cooney and Morissette asked Henson and his team to design, craft, and perform as the show's puppets, or Muppets as Henson called them. Henson agreed to help, and in 1969, Sesame Street hit the air. Parents loved the learning-centric elements of the show, and everybody loved Henson's creations
Silk
like Big Bird,
Scarf
Oscar the Grouch,
Pilot.
and Cookie Monster.
Ooh.
Now, Henson was proud of his work on Sesame Street, but he also wanted to produce a show of his own.
So in 1973, Henson pitched a new series idea using a mock-up pilot video, which was just fantastic.
A show that will be loved and adored by every Nielsen home in the country. Freaky, long-haired, dirty, cynical hippies will love our freaky, long-haired, dirty, cynical Muppets. And we'll all get temperamental and hard to work with, but you won't care, because we'll all make a lot of money.
And in a really weird twist of fate, one of the executives he pitched to at ABC with this show was none other than a young Michael Eisner, a man who would later become an infamous CEO of Disney. That'll be important later, but Eisner loved the Muppets so much that he greenlit the project not just for one, but for 2 more pilot episodes, including the Muppet Show Sex and Violence, which is not what it sounds like, but you kind of wish it was, right?
While ABC ultimately passed on the Muppets, British channel ATV swooped in and ordered a full season of the project, giving us The Muppet Show. The series debuted to incredible success, running for 5 seasons, getting 21 Emmy nominations, and launching movies, merch, and puppet cartoons. Thanks to Henson, as well as the hardworking crew in both shows, Sesame Street and the Muppets became cultural super icons for both kids and the world. And before we get into all the ugly stuff, let me just say without the slightest bit of shame, I adore both of these shows. Seriously, when's the last time you sat down and watched either series? I think because we grow up with these shows, we lose some appreciation for how incredibly talented and innovative the people working on them really are. Like, look at this shot from The Muppets Take Manhattan. That's not green screen, that's not editing. That's over 150 people helping to puppet these classic characters. And then there's Sesame Street, which has released over 5,000 episodes of high-quality educational television. If you tried to binge every episode of Sesame Street, it would take you over 140 days, over 4 months of uninterrupted binging to catch up. And there were multiple studies showing that kids who watched Sesame Street as young children had improved educational outcomes in elementary school and higher learning. Sesame Street is awesome. Plus, I think I've watched the outtakes of John Oliver and the Cookie Monster at least a dozen times.
What kind of belt you wearing?
Still, even these great series.
Alright, new.
After Henson's tragically early passing in 1990, it would fall to Henson's children to choose who would replace him as the main performer of Kermit the Frog. They'd eventually
Have a Carvana and a Mightyena.
Seemed like a great choice, as he'd worked closely with Henson in nearly every
We can
Muppet
handle
since
it.
the 1970s.
Hunter can handle it.
Until Michael Eisner stepped in. Yeah, he's not done. See, the former ABC executive was now the CEO of Disney. Eisner had remained a huge fan of the series over the decades, and in 2004, he purchased the Muppet series for Disney. Unfortunately, Whitmire and the Big Cheese instantly developed an antagonistic relationship. Whitmire blamed Disney for the fighting, claiming that his aggressive pushback against them was always done to protect Henson's vision for the series.
Yes,
while
intimidate.
Disney
We
argued that
reminded
Whitmire making
to
outrageous
swagger.
demands, harassing writers and directors, and refusing to have a Kermit understudy so he could never be replaced. It's tempting to take Whitmire's side. After all, he was part of Henson's core team and
using it later for school.
this franchise for years. But Disney wasn't the only party unhappy. Henson's own family claimed that Whitmire had been trying to take the series hostage, especially by refusing to have an understudy. Understand,
Yeah.
it takes years to learn how to master one of these puppets well enough to seamlessly transition
See?
between puppeteers.
Easy.
For example, Matt Vogel, who took over performing Big Bird in
Cast
2015,
form.
had been studying the role under Carol Spinney since 1997. The Muppets ain't no joke. This feuding between Whitmire and Disney went on behind the scenes for nearly 10 years, and whether Whitmire was defending Henson's integrity or being a prima donna is up for you to decide, but personally I suspect it was a little column A, column B. Either way, things came to a head, and Whitmire's firing by Disney was leaked on the largest Muppets fan site, touchpig.com, that's a really gross
Now-
name, by the way. I don't know why they would name
Okay, we want that. Now
But the
it's
Muppet Show
we
wasn't
have
the only Henson
Caliper,
series to run into
Slugma.
trouble with their main mascot.
Ooh.
Let's talk about Elmo. It might surprise you to hear that Elmo's a relative newcomer to the Sesame Street franchise, only becoming a main cast Muppet in 1985 with puppeteer Kevin Clash. Clash would continue working as Elmo's puppeteer for almost 25 years until 2012 when he was accused of inappropriate physical relations with a teenager. Now, we're not going to go into all the specifics because it's kind of an unusual case. There's a lot of twists and turns, internal investigations, allegations being made, then retracted, then remade, but ultimately the lawsuits were dismissed by the trial judge. Within the Sesame Street fan community, there is a intense split over whether Kevin Clash was guilty or innocent, but whatever the truth was, Kevin ended up leaving the project in 2013, and I think that was probably for the best. Not all problems and controversies with children's shows start behind the scenes, though. Sometimes it's the content itself. Like that episode of Total Drama-Rama where the kids want to get sick and stay home from school, so they go
Also
around
again-
licking things in like surfaces and floors trying to spread germs, which got
Nope.
aired right around the time of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is getting started.
Wait, what?
Or that Danish show John Dillerman, which was about a man and his giant prehensile tool that he used to do stuff like decorate Christmas trees or helicopter around or even save children with. Can I show this? Do I need to mosaic this? No, that's worse. That's worse. No, yeah, that's fine. And there are hundreds, thousands of examples of problems caused by kids television that have garnered outrage for any number of things. Way too many things for us to cover in one video. So instead, how about I just talk about a few examples of what I think are particularly interesting outrages and controversies. Starting with Tiny Toon Adventures. Set in the Looney Tooniverse, which is a thing, I guess, Tiny Toons followed a new cast of cartoons studying at Acme University who one day wanted
let's
to
go.
become big cartoon stars themselves. It was created as a collaboration between Warner Brothers and Amblin Television, Steven Spielberg's TV production
Alright.
studio, which was also notable for
Shit.
bringing us classics like
me up again.
Animaniacs, Freakazoid, Pinky and the Brain, and the Harry
The
Anderson's
website for-
TV
Oh,
sitcom.
I'm still using the
It was a
same
real thing
website
that
even though
happened,
it's
and there's
real
nothing any of us can do
face.
to change that. But since the Tiny Toons was an animated show in the early 1990s, it occasionally dipped into the very special lesson episodes. You know, stories and otherwise usually
Right.
funny shows that try to ham-fistedly teach kids about the dangers of eating disorders and drugs and STDs and underage drinking. Like that Tiny Toons
Oh,
episode.
if
One
only it
Beer.
was a
In one
smaller
beer,
one.
Buster, Plucky, and Hampton decide to have a brewski and get drunk, leading to alienating classmates and getting into a bunch of bad decisions, and even ending with them driving off a cliff in a stolen police car. The things you do when you... of course, it's then revealed that the whole episode was a PSA by the characters to show the dangers of drunk driving, I think, but still. The episode One Beer caught the attention of a lot of parental groups who felt the whole episode was a little too dark, a little too much for kids, and successfully pushed to get the whole episode banned. And hey, it's great to educate minors about mature topics, but truthfully, the episode One Beer just isn't very good. In fact, the episode is so unpopular, there's a theory that the show's writers intentionally
wait,
made it
shit,
bad
I
in
didn't
protest
count for
of
that.
network's pressure and dump to add more morality episodes like this.
Oh,
Which
it's
makes sense
dead.
considering
Oh,
the little dig at
Bunchup's
the end of the
dead.
episode.
Oh, that was so avoidable.
I hope so.
Oh, never mind.
But Tiny Toons wasn't the only 90s cartoon
Never mind.
that had its share of
Okay,
controversy. In the
that was
first
luck.
season of the Pokemon animated
That was so
series, there was
lucky.
a huge scandal over episode 38, Electric Warrior Porygon. In fact, a lot of you probably think you already know this tale,
Mhm.
right? Old episode of Pokemon, only aired in Japan once, had a bunch of flashing lights during a battle, caused thousands of children to get sick or suffer epileptic seizures, and then the episode was banned. But there's more to the story than you might know. Let's back up. In the episode, Ash and his friends use a dimensional transporter to chase after Team Rocket, who have stolen a new type of prototype Pokemon, Porygon. At the end, there's this intense and flashy scene with a series of bright, quick-shifting red and blue lights. The same kind of quick-shift lights that can sometimes induce seizures for those with photosensitive epilepsy. In the immediate period after the episode aired in Japan, there was a mass occurrence of young viewers experiencing nausea, sickness, vision impairment, and headaches.
I already had an idea.
All kids. News channels were quick to cover the unfolding emergency, warning parents to check to see if their children were okay, and also to erase any VHS recordings they might have made because of this. Although a shiny 100 yen coin to the geniuses at one news channel's coverage, who apparently re-aired the dangerous footage over and over and over again while talking about it, which caused more kids to get sick before somebody realized, hey, let's stop doing that.
Give me
Keep going there, team.
And
the week the episode aired, there was over 12,000 kids reported feeling ill over Electric Warrior Porygon. Nintendo announced an official apology, and they even stopped airing new episodes of the show for a while. Many anime, especially the ones for children, began airing short messages before broadcast, warning kids not to watch the show in a dark room, a practice that persists even today. And while Pokemon would return to television a few months later, it's pretty crazy to think 12,000 children were hurt by Nintendo's irresponsible animation. Or were they? What if I told you that this Porygon episode story was completely made up? Well, no, that would make me a liar. All that stuff actually happened. But there is some debate over whether or not the episode was as dangerous as people first thought. Let's talk about that 12,000 number. Yes, the original 600 kids taken to hospitals immediately after watching the episode absolutely suffered a negative side effect from the show, but of those 600 kids, only about 150 were hospitalized for seizures or severe symptoms, although 150 kids in a hospital, still pretty bad.
I just realized it wasn't really running.
Who reported symptoms only started feeling sick in the days after the episode aired. Weird, right? Like, why would kids start getting sick in the days after seeing the episode? Well, several studies have suggested that while the episode was absolutely dangerous to children prone to photosensitive epileptic seizures, the majority of kids likely develop side effects due to mass hysteria. Which makes sense. The kids watch the episode, feel fine, but then they go to school and the next day everybody's talking about how that episode makes you feel sick. And then they go home and
Max
talking about that episode that is supposed to make you feel sick and is all over the news with endless footage of children in ambulances and hospital beds. Young children aren't stupid, but they're impressionable, and being surrounded by that kind of news for days is probably what led to the majority of kids reporting illnesses. And if that sounds a little far-fetched, well, it's happened before. There was this Portuguese teen drama called Morangos com Acogar, which had an episode about a flu going around getting everybody sick. The next day, in real life, there were hundreds of reported cases of flu-like symptoms tracked over 14 schools around the country, some that even had to get shut down while the faculty were trying to figure out what the hell was happening. However, it turned out to be less a magical virus that infects people through television waves and more just lots of teens watching a popular teen drama. Rumors started and everything snowballed with continuous media coverage of the problem. But getting back to Pokemon, while they're not nearly as famous as the Porygon Caesar incident, Pokemon's had some other controversies as well. Like the problems over one Pokemon for its negative depiction of actually not that Pokemon, not Jinx. I know some have suggested that Jinx's design is kind of racist, but the design is probably just a reference to Japanese Ganguro fashion combined with female opera singer imagery. No, the negative depiction that I'm talking about is actually, no, not Ludicolo, the sombrero Pokemon who dances to vaguely Latin American music. Although that's not great, but it's whatever. No, the Pokemon that's caused Nintendo the most trouble over a negative depiction is Kadabra. Have you ever noticed that the spoon-wielding psychic-type Pokemon Kadabra has been missing from the main Pokemon anime for a very, very long time? No, really, the last time the Pokemon appeared was nearly 20 years ago in the 2005 episode Fear Factory Phony. So, what gives? Why has Kadabra been out of the series for so long? Well, it's all because of this man, Uri Geller. Uri Geller, seen here sitting on a throne made out of spoons, like one does, is a former magician turned television psychic who gathered fame in the 1970s for bending spoons with the power of his mind. I mean, actuality, he would just bend the spoons a lot beforehand to loosen them, and then use various sleights of hand to distract the audience while he bent the spoons with his fingers. And people fell for this all over the world, including Japan, especially Japan. He was really popular there. Which brings us back to Kadabra. You've probably made the connection between Geller, Kadabra, and the spoon. I mean, sure, Geller didn't invent spoon bending, but it was sort of his whole shtick. And the guy was very well known in Japan. He even had a music album. Even worse, the original Japanese name of Kadabra is actually Yungereder, which is a combination of the characters from Yuri and Geller, his first and last name. So it's not just some weird spoon incidents. Geller was so upset about all of this that in 2000, he attempted to sue Nintendo for $60 million, claiming that Kadabra unlawfully used his image and that Nintendo had turned him into a, quote, evil occult Pokemon character. Which, you know, true, but whatever.
Personally, I never saw what the big deal was in the first place. He got his very own Pokemon. I would love to have my own Pokemon. What the hell?
Platypyrus.
What the hell is that?
Platypyrus.
Get away! Get away!
Platypyrus.
Help! 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 Kill it! Kill it! Kill it! Kill it! Kill it!
Platypyrus.
Is it going? Is it going? Jesus, those eyes. Okay, where are we now? What channel is this? Oh, good! Gay Panic. It's current year, and there are still groups out there that'll fight tooth and nail against LGBT characters in kids' TV. Legend of Korra, Andy Mack, She-Ra, 12 Forever, Play School, Arthur, Clarence, Steven Universe, Sesame Street, The Loud House, The Owl House, My Little Pony Adventure Time, and a bazillion other shows have all seen their share of outrage just for having gay or trans characters. But as important as those shows' representations have been, many of them were released in a time where acceptance of LGBT has thankfully grown quite a bit. But in 2003, it was still pretty risky to make pro-LGBT content for kids, yet that's exactly what PBS's Postcards for Buster did. For anyone outside the US, PBS is an American television channel that airs a variety of educational and informative content, all available for free thanks to public funding and donations. It airs Sesame Street, Curious George, Arthur, and yeah, Postcards from Buster, the show about an animated rabbit named Buster who travels around the US with his weirdly human-looking father, meeting kids in different cities and learning about different ethnicities and cultures. In episode 33, Buster visits some children in the state of Vermont who just happen to have two mothers. Neither the show nor Buster make a big deal of it, they just introduce them as another happy Vermontian family. Cool, right? Sadly, before the episode...
I kill this and it's going off ground move. Wait, that's what is the kill. Okay. This is the what happens now that it's I don't know if I'm faster or if it's faster. Okay. Is it faster? Because paralyzed speed is up by 1. I'm faster, I think. So this self-destruct will might kill if it high rolls, I think. Oof. Now there's like not that much else that can threaten me. I almost killed this one. 4 PS in the Storm Rig, I can use Pikachu. Developer. Going for water. Like that. The double attack? Oh. Sweet. Ooh. It's not gonna kill, right? I'm high level, it's neutral. Do we need camo? No, we don't really need camo. A fake out would do. I attack. Gonna go for aerial ace. Go. I'm gonna synthesis. It's paralyzed. Not gonna. It keeps using center. In the it can't really hit. Right, sweet.
The episode made it to air. Well, it looks like some lunatic heard about it. They contacted PBS and they demanded that the show either pull the episode or never ever receive public funds again if they were going to continue to promote the gay agenda. What? Oh, I'm sorry. Small correction. It wasn't a lunatic. It was the Education Secretary of the United States, Margaret Spellings, who literally, on her first day on the top, decided to threaten PBS with being defunded if they aired the episode. Because God forbid, kids see this.
This is one of my favorite pictures.
How come?
Because it has my mom and Gillian, people I love a lot, and they mean a lot to me.
I try not to be cynical on this channel, but come on. Come on. Really? PBS had no choice but to concede to Spelling's threat. I mean, they need those funds to stay on the air, but you still gotta respect them for trying to do what they did, especially since almost 4 years prior to that, PBS had gotten some flack for having a gay character in a show that didn't even have a gay character. Teletubbies was a hit BBC children's show that aired on PBS in America between 1997 and 2001. It followed the 4 Teletubbies in their weirdly psychedelic Shire as they walked around and made noises and fell over and stuff. Look, I don't really understand the Teletubbies, but that's the basic gist. Unlike most weekday morning shows that targeted kids ages 3 to 5, Teletubbies was made to appeal to infants and very young toddlers, which meant less dialogue and more short bursts of colorful, engaging content. There was Poe, Lala, Dipsy, and of course, Tinky Winky. But in 1999, out of seemingly nowhere, famous televangelist Reverend Jerry Falwell, best known for blaming terrorist attacks on the acceptance of gay couples, charming, publicly announced to the world that in his God-given expert opinion, Tinky Winky was gay and needed to be taken off the air. Now, you might be wondering, what evidence did Falwell have that Tinky Winky was gay? Well, ladies and gentlemen of the off-screen jury, I'm Lawyer Paper Will, doing a terrible southern accent despite the fact that I was born in Georgia, here to present Jerry Falwell's irrefutable evidence that Tinky Winky was nothing but gay and kinky. Number 1, Tinky's purple. Gay people love purple, that's just a fact. Number 2, Tinky Winky's head symbol is an upside-down purple triangle, which if you flip right side up and you change the color to be pink, that's a gay pride symbol right there. Number 3, Tinky Winky has a big red purse. Men don't have purses, and Tinky Winky is a man. Wait, is Tinky Winky a man? Whatever. You know what? If all that proof wasn't enough to convince you, then I think you need to see the video evidence. Hit the tape. Rest my case. Somehow, Falwell managed to gather a following with his claims about Tinky, which would force an executive producer from the Teletubbies to hold, I'm not kidding, an emergency press conference to address Tinky Winky's sexuality, in which he announces that, quote, the fact that Tinky Winky carries a magic bag doesn't make him gay. Now, you could argue that Falwell was just a jerk who let his bigotry color his perception of an innocent kids show, leading him to making a big spectacle. But can I get a little conspiratorial with you? Because between you and me, I don't think for a second Falwell ever believed that Tinky Winky was gay. No, I think Falwell was looking to create a distraction. I noticed that exactly 4 days before Falwell had his whole Tinky Winky gate. That's a gate with a G-A-Y. I'm not funny. He just so happened to have delivered a speech about the Antichrist. And in this speech, he said that the Antichrist would be Jewish. So that's pretty bad. It's not a great speech. Falwell started getting slammed for being anti-Semitic because he was being anti-Semitic, when all of a sudden he decided that right then and there was the time to wage a huge publicized PR campaign about how Tinky Winky was gay. Oh yeah, don't look at the stuff over here I said about Jewish people being the Antichrist. No, look over here. Don't look at this. Look at this. This is the real story. Isn't this thing I said crazy? Triangles, red purses, hide your kids. I'm not anti-Semitic. Falwell presented the most flashy, headline-snagging, WTFing, news cycle-dominating thing he could think of, and he waved it in front of the country's collective news faces to direct attention away from what he had said about Jewish people. And it worked! People forgot about the whole Jewish people will birth the Antichrist thing and focused on a very silly man and a very silly Teletubba theory.
However, for all of Falwell's controversy, he's got nothing on our next figure. But before we talk about that, let's talk about today's sponsor, NordVPN. Fans of the channel know I've been really hesitant to accept sponsor offers for a while because I didn't want to endorse something that I don't, personally use or have tested. But NordVPN, I've actually been using for years, so it's pretty cool to have them as a sponsor, especially since I rely on NordVPN for a lot of the stuff I make on this very channel. See, I could tell you about NordVPN's fast internet speeds, zero-click protection, anti-malware tools. I could tell you that hackers and scammers and phishers, they're getting more and more sophisticated in how they try to get to your digital information. Yeah, I could tell you about all that stuff. So I did. I guess I just told you about that stuff. But I also mentioned that, I use NordVPN to make my videos. Well, what did I mean? Well, as an American guy living in Japan, you would be amazed at how much stuff from the US and other countries is region locked. You can't access it from here. With NordVPN, I can choose my IP location and view stuff I use for this channel. Even if you're not living abroad, well, this is still a super useful feature. Down in the pinned comment, you'll find the link to some of my favorite and really weird Japanese bands whose content is region locked outside Japan. Go to nordvpn.com/paperwheel, get a 2-year plan, 1 month free, 30-day money-back guarantee. Just use coupon code PAPERWHEEL and then listen to some of that region-locked music because it's so good. Now, let's get back to the show. Between the 1990s and the late 2010s, there was nobody bigger in the children's television market than Dan Schneider.
Sure.
Working for Nickelodeon, he created, wrote, or produced All That, The Amanda Show, Kenan and Kel, Drake and Josh, iCarly, Zoe 101, Victorious, Sam and Cat, Henry Danger, Game Shakers, and more. Plenty of grown-ups found Snyder shows to be a little cheesy, and fair enough, but there's no denying that his stuff resonated with kids. This unstoppable Snyder-Nick relationship continued happily until 2018, when after decades of working together, it was suddenly announced that Snyder was leaving to focus on his family and maybe some personal projects. At least that's the official story. See, before Snyder left the network, Nickelodeon's parent company had in fact ordered an internal investigation about some of Snyder's less PG behavior, with accusations of verbal abuse, throwing tantrums on set, mean emails, and more. Some think that this investigation was the actual cause of Snyder's exit from Nickelodeon, and this whole thing was far less mutual than it had been presented as. Keep in mind, this was all happening the same year that Hollywood producer and human garbage pile, Harvey Weinstein, was ousted from power over sexual abuse and assault, so it's certainly possible Nick was hoping to avoid some sort of parallels being drawn through him to Snyder. Truthfully, we don't really know why. We do know that Nick was done with Snyder. The internet wasn't. Beginning in the early to mid-2010s, several internet forums were slowly developing a theory that Mr. Snyder had a foot fetish, which by itself is not a big deal, but they think that he specifically had a fetish for the feet of children, which is a big deal.
That might be the only thing I have for her
as a Nick producer to create content to satiate that fetish, which is a very big deal. And hold on, whoa. Let's be clear, that is a huge accusation to just throw around. So what's their evidence? No, we already did that bit. Let's just talk about the evidence. First up, according to them, Snyder shows have a lot of child foot humor, more than most content. And if you search for Snyder foot-related content, there's an endless number of compilations showing pretty weird things with feet and performers from his shows. And on the Twitter account for one of the shows, there was even a tweet asking kids to write the name of the show on their feet and send a picture of it for a retweet, although we don't know if Snyder was involved with that tweet or not. It may have just been, some intern on the PR team trying to do something funny. But we do know Snyder used his own account to ask people to name the toes on Jeanette McCurdy, who played Sam on iCarly. Another Reddit commenter in a now-deleted post claimed that Snyder once paid her $100 to let him try to tickle or massage her feet, which, if true, is a little weird. Alright, so what's Snyder's response? Well, in 2021, he denied the accusations, saying they were ridiculous, and he argued that he wouldn't have been able to pursue his career for so long if there had ever been any proof of something like this. And here's the thing. I know it is a super popular internet theory that Snyder is some sort of foot predator, and by taking a position where you doubt that theory, it makes you look like you're, enabling a predator. But the deeper I went into this topic, and the more research I did, the less convinced I became. As far as I can tell, most of this Snyder stuff formed are these celebrity gossip conspiracy forums, less, oh, who is that actor dating, and more like, these are the people controlling the world, those kinds of sites. And it eventually bled out into this internet's public consciousness, not as a theory anymore, but as a fact. Don't get me wrong, there's plenty of confirmed employee accounts of Snyder being a pretty crappy guy to work with, and that's really not the kind of person you want in charge of children who are trying to navigate the already messed up world of Hollywood. But if we're talking about exploiting kids, how about some of the YouTube videos about this guy? There are people who put a picture of Snyder shows, performers and stuff, like in a thumbnail, next to a big quote like, "He touched me," and then you watch the video, and the performer literally never said the quote. You want to make videos about kids getting exploited by Hollywood? Go for it. That's great. But don't use children's faces all over your thumbnails with fake quotes to get clicks and views, because that, to me, that's exploitation. Again, Snyder leaving Nickelodeon, that's a good thing. But I'd argue that compared to Snyder, there was a much more pressing issue with someone else from Nickelodeon. Let me introduce you to Brian Peck.
The name might not ring a bell, but if you like old zombie movies, well, you probably still won't know his name, although you might remember his brief scene from The Return of the Living Dead. After a short acting stint in the 1980s, Peck would go on to work on several Nick shows, including All That and The Amanda Show. Usually it was behind-the-scenes stuff, although he did appear in a couple of things, such as the guy who really likes his pickle.
Pickle Boy likes to hurt and tease pickles.
Ooh, that did not age well, huh? Peck was also involved with Snyder's Nickelodeon camps up until 2004 when he was charged with a series of crimes against a minor, most of which I can't say on YouTube, but you can probably guess at least what some of those were. After a 16-month stint in prison, which seems really short, Peck was released and went right back to working in children's television. Awesome. Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Great. Again, after his release from jail over sex crimes with people who aren't adults, Peck performed roles on The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, that Landon Tipton movie, and Jack and the Beanstalk in 2009. Credit to Nickelodeon, they never hired Peck back to work on the shows after his conviction, but it seems nobody on the mid-2000s Disney Channel recruitment team knew how to ask Jeeves, a job applicant's criminal history. Hey Jeeves, is this guy a f***ing pedophile? Yeah? Oh great, thanks Jeeves, bye. Let's just move on. 4Kids. 4Kids Entertainment was an anime licensing company. A company that would pay to license anime from Japanese studios, redub the dialogue in English, and then sell the English versions to networks for broadcast. 4Kids' string of mega successes in the 1990s and early 2000s like Yu-Gi-Oh!, Kirby Right Back At Ya, One Piece, Sonic X, and Pokemon.
Lot of pirates.
Oh, it's back! 4Kids was a big part in taking anime from a subculture in the West to a mainstream audience, but they also developed a negative reputation for the polarizing quality of their voice dubs.
Hey, Tim, stay down or we're busted.
Your attitude's the pits. Cherry, peach, or apricot?
I want you to have a look at this Pokemon.
Huh? What is this thing?
And also what you might call over-enthusiastic censorship and obstructive cultural edits, like erasing pistols from bad guys but leaving their finger guns, or removing Japanese text but not adding any English on top of the text, turning cigarettes into lollipops, or their most famous example, getting characters to point to rice balls and call them jelly donuts over and over and over again.
Have a donut. That always cheers me up. Pika pika.
These donuts
Hello
are
everybody,
great.
it's Techno
Jelly
here.
filled my
Today I'm going to show you both
Nothing beats
what's
a
under your
jelly
make your way to
filled
the
donut.
bed and
But
small
that is why
little
4Kids
items
is
here
included
in
in
these
this video,
trees. That
because
is your...
I kind of get what they were doing. Many of their edits were relatively minor cultural changes to help ease the transition of anime into that Western audience. 4Kids, like many licensing companies in the 90s, needed to make sure their content was accessible as possible to appeal to people who might not be familiar with anime. And some of their more bizarre changes make sense in the context of when they got aired. Like, take the Yu-Gi-Oh! Finger Guns example. Yes, it looks ridiculous, don't get me wrong, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Was only being aired a couple of years after the US Columbine incident, where guns were a hot-button issue in kids' entertainment. These things were tense in America in a way they just weren't in Japan, so it's understandable why 4Kids wanted to make some changes, and honestly, most kids probably didn't think about it very much. At least I didn't. I'd even argue that in 4Kids' earlier stuff, there was a lot of passion in what they did, especially from the voice performers and translators. No, 4Kids isn't in this video because of their off-putting localization choices. They're in the video because they broke the law. It turns out 4Kids wasn't doing so great in the late 2000s, most likely due to their quantity over quality approach to anime releases, as well as losing some big names like Pokemon. Is he here? Is he here? It's going. Alright. Like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! 4Kids started making deals with American broadcasting companies over licenses 4Kids technically didn't own or pay for, or have the right to do that with. And even with the license they did own, there were cases of them misreporting royalty deductions, submitting false tax withholdings, and sometimes just straight up lying about their revenue, which is a crime. Once Japanese companies found out, and of course they found out, 4Kids lost some of their biggest names, mainly the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, and in 2011, they filed for bankruptcy. And sure, legal issues with anime licensing have always been messy. Funimation's anti-piracy policies have been borderline psychotic.
Odex has sent legal threats to children for torrenting content. ADVision, Gainax, SRE, Crunchyroll. Crunchyroll has been sued over fucking stickers. Nearly every major company in the licensing world has sued or been sued over something. It's a ridiculous legal minefield. But for me, the 4Kids story is the saddest example because their content was such a big part of my childhood. Despite the hit or miss voice work and the weird cleavage stuff and that, whatever's going on there, 4Kids helped turn anime mainstream. It's sad to see that group go down in flames over something they could have avoided by just staying focused and delivering good work and keeping up with the standards of Western anime fans. Of course, not all the problems with anime are due to licensing. There's tons of stuff going on behind the scenes in animation in Japan that we need to talk about. I know, not all anime is made for kids, but children were the main demographic when anime was first televised in Japan, and it all really started with one man, manga artist and animator Osamu Tezuka, and his 1964 show, Astro Boy. Set in the distant future of 2004, the series was about a young android named Astro Boy who protected the city and the world from out-of-control robots. It's a great show that sometimes gets a negative reputation due to some of the unfortunate English dubs.
It's not right for a robot to behave as that one is. Astro Boy is my name.
And this show was the foundation on which the modern anime industry was built, for better or for worse. See, it hadn't been easy for Tezuka to get Astro Boy on the air. At the time, broadcasting executives in Japan were concerned that the cost of a weekly anime show would just be too high. Yeah, a couple of series like Tetsujin 28 and Wolf Boy Ken had aired to moderate success, but networks were still unconvinced. Tezuka, though, he was sure that if he could just get Astro Boy on the air, it would blast off and prove that serialized animated shows were a viable market, not just a fad. So, Tezuka and his animation team made a very risky offer to the broadcasters. Tezuka's company would make Astro Boy on severely reduced pay with the condition that they'd keep a larger percentage of any merchandising profit. Essentially, if Astro Boy was a hit, Tezuka's team would make a killing on merchandise, but if it failed, well, they'd probably be out of business. The networks loved this deal because it was basically costing them nothing, so they went ahead with it. Luckily for Tezuka and his team, the contract gamble paid off, and Astro Boy was a nationwide success with merch sales that easily offset any initial losses. In Tezuka's mind, this was the perfect outcome, not just because his team had made some money, not just because they'd made a high-quality program, but because now TV broadcasters would pay a fair income to all future anime studios. After all, they'd seen how successful it could be.
Which means you need at least 7 badges to get the Water Stone in Pokemon Emerald version. For the first method, you can get it by flying over to Slateport City. You're going to need a Pokemon that can both surf and dive, which means you need at least 7 badges to get the Water Stone, unfortunately. So if you have a Lombre like I did, you're going to have to wait a while until you can evolve it.
Damn it! Alright.
So surely they're going to pay fairly now, right? Predictably, the networks thought about it and decided, they really preferred not paying more money, and instead they used Astro Boy's contract as a precedent for how all anime would be funded from then on. A precedent that still stands today. Modern animation studios are still getting paid pennies on the dollar or smaller yens on the bigger yens. They're not getting paid enough, with the majority of revenue going to networks and production committees who often hold the IP licenses. Shingo Adachi, a head animator for the popular series Sword Art Online, says that there's simply no dream animation job where you make a good salary and have good working conditions. It just doesn't exist. Animation veteran Jun Arai has also added that with the Pokemon series, Platinum. Whatever. You're actually kind of cute in a whole, God's little mistake kind of way. Who's a little abomination? Who's a little abomination? It's you. Yes, it's you. But yeah, Jun Arai has said that the Pokemon anime, which makes $100 million a year, just on the anime, not including any of the other stuff, that show pays its animators less per dollar than what you'd make working at the next door 7-Eleven. That's rough. And it's not just salaries. Working hours are long and brutal in the animation studios. There are countless reports of workers in the industry being hospitalized due to overwork at rates even higher than the national average in Japan, the country famous for overworking. Yoshifumi Kondo, a senior animation director in Ghibli Studios, died of an overwork-related aneurysm in 1998, which caused Miyazaki so much grief that he ended up retiring for several years. And because the only people who are willing to put up with all of this do so because they're passionate about their craft, well, that means not many people are pushing for change. This is the unseen problem behind most anime you liked as a kid, and probably most shows you like now.
unless it's from one of the very, very few paying studios with good working conditions like Kyoto Animation, your favorite stuff is probably being made by a studio full of underpaid artists, and it's a deadly situation, and it's not improving. Staying on the topic of animation, but moving back stateside, this right here is John Kricfalusi, creator of the 90s animated series, The Ren and Stimpy Show. Alongside Doug and Rugrats, The Ren and Stimpy Show was one of Nickelodeon's earliest Nicktoons series, and it helped put the channel on the map for original programming. But unlike Doug and Rugrats and most shows for kids, Kricfalusi wanted Ren and Stimpy to be hyper-violent, risque, constantly pushing boundaries, and frankly, kids loved it for that. Nickelodeon, however, didn't. While the show was a major hit for Nick, Kricfalusi and his team would constantly miss deadlines and go tens of thousands of dollars over budget, putting Nick into a tricky position. On the one hand, they were thrilled to have a success in their hands on their very small network, but on the other, Nick wasn't able to capitalize on that success due to those delays. And when I say delays, I'm not talking like a week or a month. One episode, Stimpy's Invention, took over a year to produce. Still, by most accounts I could find, Nick wasn't happy over the delays, but he'd probably have accepted them had the show been more on brand. In 1991, Nickelodeon was still early in its original programming period, and they wanted to paint themselves as clean and parent-friendly. Neither term you could use to describe Ren and Stimpy with. But Kricfalusi, to put it lightly, didn't respond well to Nick's pressure. According to some of his and Nick's staff, Kricfalusi had let some of the success go to his head, believing that as the creator and the voice actor for Ren, there was no way Nick would ever get rid of him, no matter what he did. So, when Nickelodeon pushed down on him to deliver episodes on time, he responded with, episodes will cost what they cost and take as long as they take, and that he was going to keep putting in risque humor that he wanted because Nick could do it themselves if they disagree. So they did. Nick terminated his contract, gave him the boot, and continued making the show on their own. And while it's sad to see a talented artist losing control over their work, the more I read about the situation, the more and more sympathetic I become to Nickelodeon. Kricfalusi was undeniably a brilliant creator, but he was also kind of a jerk sometimes. Various workers from the show have said that working with Kricfalusi was a nightmare. The man had tempers, he would rip up drawings, he screamed, he demanded perfection, and he refused to hire anybody who didn't meet his impossibly high standards. So, the studio was always understaffed, and that caused more delays. And after being fired, Kricfalusi has been accused of creating a smear campaign against any of the artists that chose to continue with Ren and Stimpy instead of resigning in support with him. David Konigsberg, a technical director on the show, says Kricfalusi literally shoved him down a flight of stairs about this. But it would also be unfair of me to imply that Kricfalusi's team universally hated him. They didn't. In fact, there were many on his staff who were fiercely loyal to the guy because although he was challenging to work with, John K. got results. That episode I mentioned earlier that took a whole year to produce, that episode is considered a modern classic of animation. It's genius.
It's the happy, happy, joy, joy song.
Plus, who the hell am I to criticize somebody for being bad at deadlines? This video was supposed to be out like 3 months ago. And in between animation seasons, Kricfalusi has been known to pay some of his artists money when not working. But all the things we've talked about so far, that's just the bad stuff. We're here to talk about the ugly stuff. Let's rewind a little bit back, before Kricfalusi got fired. Ren and Stimpy is a gigantic success, and it's coming on its second season, and kids all over the world are falling in love with the show, including the 13-year-old aspiring artist, Robin Bird. She loved the show so much, she even sent a fan letter to Kricfalusi talking about her dreams of working in animation and how his show had inspired her. And to her delight, she got a letter back from him. She got several letters back from him. Then she started getting care packages from him with things like art supplies and animation tools. And after Bird turned 16, Kricfalusi flew her out to work as an intern at his animation studio, and also to secretly live with him as they dated. Yep. John K. had hired his underage teenage girlfriend as an intern to work on the content he was releasing. After Bird ended the relationship once she became an adult, Kricfalusi had already begun corresponding with another girl, the 14-year-old Katie Rice. John K. even attended her 15th birthday.
Hey, this is Katie Rice. She is one of the young artists I was telling you about. He showed me one time. She drew, I was at her 15th birthday party. We'll tell you that backstory.
Allegedly, much of this was an open secret on John's animation team, but it only became truly public in the 2010s when a BuzzFeed article detailing the issue was released with quotes from Bird and Rice. Crick Felicity didn't deny much of the article's allegations, making a public apology post on Facebook to Bird and Rice soon after. Although he did strongly imply that some of the article was embellished for sensationalism, and hey, it's a BuzzFeed article, so I'd suggest taking anything that's not a quote from the victims themselves with a grain of salt, but those quotes, as well as Crick Felicity's own admissions, are mountains more than enough evidence to show that he was a predator to young fans.
No shocker here, but sometimes bad things happen. Maybe there's a major natural disaster, an act of terrorism, a worldwide pandemic, and in the immediate days, weeks, and months after those events, it's kind of seen as insensitive by TV networks to make or air content too reminiscent of it. So a lot of things get temporarily pulled from television. Obviously, this kind of tragedy-redolent content doesn't only affect kids' TV, it happens to everything. Like this trailer for the original Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire, which was replaced due to a very unnice thing happening in New York soon after. There's also really, really poorly timed advertisements like this 1989 Kentucky Fried Chicken ad talking about how everybody's so excited to come out and support the new KFC in Tiananmen Square.
Now there's a recipe that has even the Chinese crossing the road.
Which aired as this happened. Comics, video games, newspaper strips, even trading card games have to be careful about this stuff. In early 2020, Magic the Gathering had these limited time special prints of Godzilla-related cards, and one of the cards was Space Godzilla. Looks cool as hell, but unfortunately his full name was Space Godzilla Death Corona. God, that's bad timing. It's not Magic the Gathering's fault, and they fixed it quickly, of course, but you can still find it online for $11 on Amazon. But tragedy-redolent content is especially tricky to navigate in kids' entertainment. The earliest example in history, at least the earliest one that I could find, was in 1940's A Wild Hare, Bugs Bunny's debut cartoon. Bugs comes up behind Elmer and plays Guess Who, with Elmer guessing Barbara Stanwyck.
Barbara Stanwyck.
Unless you saw the cartoon before 1942, when the original guess was Carole Lombard.
Carole Lombard?
Unfortunately, Lombard passed away in a plane crash around the cartoon's debut, and the line was changed. And there are tons of examples throughout media. Several episodes of Freakazoid with visual cameos by Princess Diana got pulled after her fatal accident. The 1997 episode of Rugrats called Vacation had two Vegas magicians, Siegfried and Roy, being attacked by a tiger as a joke, but it got pulled after that actually happened in 2003. There was a G.I. Joe rerun pulled in 2011 since the episode showed Cobra trying to destroy a Japanese city with earthquakes, which then immediately happened in March 2011. An episode of Lion Guard titled Never Roar Again, which prominently featured crocodiles trying to eat the kid characters. That got pulled after the 2016 alligator attack near Disney World. Chip and Dale, Tailspin, 101 Dalmatians, friggin' Sonic the Hedgehog, they have all run into this problem. Buzz Lightyear of Star Command had not one, but two episodes pulled. Those episodes, by the way, were Inside Job and Conspiracy, and got pulled due to their name or the storyline where Buzz is accused of trying to kill the president. The longer you spend in that weird rabbit hole, the more and more you start seeing a certain idea, a certain conspiracy theory. Predictive programming in kids' television. Believers in this theory think there's a secret group of powerful people who control the world, and that this group plans and orchestrates all tragedies, all disasters, and all terrorist attacks. But to make sure that people accept those happenings as normal, that group also plants little clues and hints all over fiction and media.
Beverly Hills Cynthia lunchbox, a pony, and a 9/11 emergency surgical kit with working stethoscope.
And look, even as a big skeptic, I love learning about things like the paranormal, about UFOs, and yeah, about conspiracy theories and even cults. I have a whole video about movies and music made by actual cults. So as someone who can appreciate a fun conspiracy theory, trust me when I say the examples I've seen of predictive programming in kids' television are weak. Like, sticking with that unnice 2001 New York thing, let's go through some of the most popular examples of, quote, proof that some secret society organized it decades in advance and put hints all over media about it. Let's see, a 1978 episode of Super Friends with the Legion of Doom making a tower bend a little, a 1985 episode of G.I. Joe where a plane hits two it doesn't even hit them, it parks. An episode of Spider-Man Unlimited where two pillars get knocked down. An episode of Gargoyles where there's a blast on the top of the World Trade Center. In a show based in New York. Wow, what a surprise. They used the tallest building. There's a scene in DuckTales where a plane knocks over some statues, and one of my favorites, a background movie poster in Johnny Bravo with a building on fire. Look at it. Look at the proof. Secret cartoon secret agents must have snuck in one night and drawn that burning building on a poster just so kids would remember that in 7 or 8 years and then be like, oh, I saw that in Johnny Bravo, so that's normal. It's just absurd. Like, there's a 1994 episode of Iron Man that had a terrorist plan to fly some hijacked planes into the Pentagon and the World Trade. Oh. But the truth is, nobody is brainwashing kids with predictive programming.
They do it with advertisements.
Between 1946 and 1980, kid-targeting advertisements in the US were somewhat limited by broadcasting rules. But in 1981, the FCC began dismantling regulations on ads for kids, which paved the way for what is now sometimes referred to as the era of 30-minute commercials. Companies could make a toy, then make a TV show about the toy, then air commercials for the toy during the TV show about the toy. And they could line up 2, 3, 4 hours of programming like this back to back to back. In the first half of the 1980s, cartoons featuring merchandise characters increased over 300%. And I'm not just talking about action figures, although I'm definitely also talking about action figures. Snacks, posters, stickers, clothes, lunchboxes, McDonald's toys, everything. Even talking teddy bears like Teddy Ruxpin and his creepy-ass live action show, around which you could even advertise the toy. Eventually, the Children's Television Act was set up to limit commercials to kids during prime time, so luckily, that's not a problem anymore. But the reason I'm talking about toys, well, I'm not suggesting that all merch-driven shows were inherently bad. They weren't. Lots of them were engaging, memorable, and well-written. Like I said earlier, I love